It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror at 15:30 that afternoon, smoothing down the dress I had carefully chosen weeks earlier. My son's wedding day. The kind of day a mother dreams about. The kind of day where you imagine being seated proudly in the front row, holding back tears as you watch your child start a new chapter. But instead, I found myself staring at a photo on social media, a photo that showed the wedding already in progress, the ceremony in full swing, and me nowhere to be found. My son, Ethan, stood tall in his tuxedo, his bride radiant beside him. Their friends and her family gathered close. And there it was, the confirmation that the whispers I'd tried so hard to dismiss were true. The wedding had begun without me. I can still remember how my hands trembled, the way my chest ached like someone had pressed a heavy stone against it. There was no phone call, no last-minute explanation, not even a hurried text, just silence. My own son had walked down the aisle, spoken his vows, and sealed his marriage while I sat at home clutching a corsage that would never be pinned to my dress. I'm Ruth Collins, 68 years old, retired school secretary, mother of 2, grandmother of 4. My life has been ordinary in many ways, but ordinary doesn't mean easy. I've buried a husband, paid off a mortgage dollar by dollar, and carried more than my share of responsibility with a smile, because that's what family is supposed to mean. I've always believed in showing up, in being there when it counted most. And yet, when the moment came for me to watch my son promise forever, I was deliberately left behind. The sting wasn't only in the exclusion itself, it was in realizing that somewhere along the way, my place in his life had shifted from essential to optional. I thought of the countless dinners I'd hosted, the birthdays I never missed, the nights I'd watched the grandkids so he and his wife could enjoy a quiet evening. All of it, in that moment, seemed erased by a decision I didn't even know he had made. I sat down on the edge of my bed and tried to breathe. Tried to understand what could make a son shut the door on his own mother. Betrayal is a sharp thing, it cuts quickly, but the ache lingers long after. And yet, even as the tears blurred the image on my phone, a quiet thought settled in my chest. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't random. Somewhere in the past months, maybe even years, there had been signs, small choices, subtle words, moments I brushed off because I loved him too much to believe the truth. Looking back now, I see them clearly. The betrayal didn't start that day, it only revealed itself. And that realization was where the real story began. When I think back on it now, the signs were all there, scattered across the years like breadcrumbs I chose not to follow. At the time, they felt like small things too small to make an issue out of, too petty to bring up when I wanted harmony more than conflict. But when you gather those moments together, they paint a picture I can't unsee. I remember one evening at dinner, when I'd prepared a meal after a long day of babysitting the grandkids. I set the table, proud of the roast I'd made, only to hear my daughter-in-law laugh lightly and suggest to Ethan that perhaps I was tired and didn't need to be burdened with helping so often. I brushed it off as her trying to be thoughtful. But her words carried an edge, one that quietly pushed me further to the margins. Another time, it was photographs. I noticed frames in Ethan's house filled with family pictures, holidays, vacations, little league games, my son smiling, his wife beside him, the children in their arms. But there was an absence I couldn't ignore. My face was missing. The photos I had once been part of were quietly replaced. My presence erased with a smile and a redecorated frame. I told myself it was nothing, that younger families wanted fresh pictures. But in my heart, I felt the gap. There were financial pieces, too. I'd given Ethan and Tessa $20,000 years ago, money I'd saved from decades of working at the school, to help with the down payment on their home. It wasn't a loan, not really. I'd said it was for them, for their future. Still, when conversations about who contributed what arose, I noticed how quickly that sacrifice disappeared from memory. My support was reframed as if it had never happened, as if my help had been a given, not a choice. Even with the grandchildren, I noticed changes. At first, I was the one they turned to for weekend sleepovers and bedtime stories, but slowly, invitations became scarce. Plans were always already made. I told myself it was just busy schedules, that children grow and family dynamics shift. But I can see now that it was another way of moving me further outside their circle. At the time, I excused it all. I told myself that families go through phases, that I was being sensitive, that love would always anchor me in their lives. I wanted so badly to believe that nothing could change the bond between a mother and her child. But bonds don't always break suddenly. Sometimes they fray one thread at a time, until you don't notice the unraveling until the whole rope has gone slack. Looking back, I realize I had already been turned into a guest in my own son's life long before the wedding day. And that realization was as painful as the exclusion itself. Because betrayal doesn't just happen in one moment, it grows, slowly, in the quiet spaces where respect used to live. And when I finally understood that, I knew something inside me had to change. The night after the wedding photo appeared, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the corsage still lying untouched beside me. Its petals had begun to curl inward, drying out before ever being worn. I should have thrown it away, but I couldn't. It felt like a symbol of everything I'd been left out of, something meant for me that I was denied. I opened my laptop, thinking maybe I'd distract myself with the news or a recipe blog. Instead, a notification popped up. A mutual acquaintance had posted more photos from the wedding reception. I clicked through them one by one, my heart breaking all over again. The laughter, the music, the toasts, all of it captured in bright color. My son looked so happy, and yet, I was nowhere in the room. And then, buried between smiling faces and champagne glasses, I saw it. A picture of the gift table, neatly stacked envelopes and cards, my handwriting on one of them, the card I had dropped off at their house earlier that week, never realizing I would not be there to hand it to him myself. Later, I would find out my gift had been opened, the check inside deposited, without so much as a thank you. That moment broke something inside me. Not just the exclusion, but the realization that my love, my effort, even my money had been accepted while I, the person offering them, had been cast aside. It was no longer just about being forgotten. It was about being used. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, tears blurring the images. The grief was heavy, but beneath it, another feeling stirred. Anger, not the kind that makes you slam doors, but the kind that sharpens you, the kind that whispers you deserve better. For the first time in years, I stopped excusing what had been happening. I stopped telling myself stories to make the pain easier. The truth stood bare before me. I had allowed myself to be erased, one quiet compromise at a time. And I realized I had a choice. I could stay invisible, keep accepting whatever scraps of respect were handed my way. Or I could step out of the shadows they'd pushed me into and reclaim my place, not through shouting or scenes, but with quiet strength. You see, people sometimes forget that age doesn't erase experience. I may be 68, but years of working in a school office taught me how to manage budgets, keep records, and notice details others overlook. I had kept my household running through lean times and loss. I had raised children on a shoestring, made every dollar stretch, and most of all, I had learned patience, the kind that can outlast arrogance. That night, I closed my laptop with a steadiness I hadn't felt in a long while. Betrayal had brought me to my knees, but clarity was helping me stand. I wasn't going to confront anyone right away. I wasn't going to demand apologies or explanations. That would only give them more power over my peace. No, I would watch. I would listen. I would gather what I needed quietly, carefully. Because if being excluded had taught me anything, it was that silence could be a weapon. And this time, it was going to be mine. The morning after my decision, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal still hurt, but the fog had lifted. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop not to scroll mindlessly, but to act. The first thing I did was log into the joint savings account I had once opened for Ethan. It had been meant as a safety net, a cushion for emergencies. I hadn't looked at it closely in months. What I found made my stomach twist. Transfers, regular ones, small enough to slip past notice, but steady. 20 here, 50 there, sometimes more. Over time, the total bled away into numbers that didn't add up. It wasn't Ethan's handwriting I recognized in those digital footprints. It was hers. My daughter-in-law's name appeared again and again. She had access to accounts she had no business touching. And suddenly, I knew the wedding exclusion wasn't just about family tensions. It was about control of my son, of my grandchildren, and now, of money that didn't belong to her. I stared at the screen, the ache in my chest hardening into resolve. With a steady breath, I clicked into the account settings and froze every card and transfer linked to her. In a few minutes, the tap she'd been drinking from so casually had run dry. It was the quietest move I could have made, invisible to most, but I knew it would be felt almost instantly. And I didn't stop there. I downloaded every statement, every transfer, every tiny withdrawal. My printer hummed as page after page slid out, evidence building in neat black ink. For once, the paper in my hands was more than numbers, it was power. I tucked the stack into a folder and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, the same place where I'd once stored my late husband's insurance forms. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, my old friend Paula. She had worked in the school district with me before retraining as a private investigator after her divorce. If anyone knew how to untangle hidden knots, it was her. Paula didn't need the details that morning. She simply listened as I explained enough to make her pause. Her calm assurance on the other end of the line reminded me why we had always trusted each other. She told me she'd look into it discreetly, that she'd be in touch soon. By late afternoon, the silence broke. My phone buzzed with a message not from Paula, but from Tessa. It was polite on the surface, almost syrupy, but underneath I could read the panic. She claimed her card wasn't working, that maybe the bank had made a mistake. I didn't respond. I simply set the phone down and let her stew. Because the truth was, the mistake wasn't the bank's. It was hers for assuming I would stay blind forever. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees outside my window, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long while. Not just anger, not even relief, but satisfaction. Quiet satisfaction that for the first time in years, I had made a move she hadn't anticipated. And it was only the beginning. It didn't take long for Paula to call me back. She asked me to meet her at a small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one would think twice about two older women sitting over tea. I remember walking in, my heart steady, but my palms damp, knowing she wouldn't have asked to meet if it wasn't serious. Paula slid a manila envelope across the table toward me, her eyes carrying the weight of what she had uncovered. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling as photo after photo spilled out. There was my daughter-in-law, Tessa, dressed in designer sundresses I had never seen her wear before, smiling in snapshots that weren't meant for me. But it wasn't just her. Beside her in every picture stood a man I didn't recognize at first, a younger man, broad-shouldered, with his arm wrapped comfortably around her waist. Paula spoke softly, but the words hit like thunder. His name was Brandon Cole. Personal trainer, not just a fling, but someone she had been traveling with for months, slipping away on work retreats and wellness weekends while Ethan worked late hours at the firm. The receipts Paula had pulled confirmed it: hotels, restaurants, flights, all charged to accounts tied back to my son. My stomach twisted as I stared at the evidence. It wasn't just betrayal of love. It was betrayal built on theft. Money meant for my son's stability, for my grandchildren's future, had been funneled into sunsets and champagne with another man. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes burned as I forced myself to look at every picture, to read every receipt, as if proof would dull the blade. But instead, each page cut deeper. I thought back to the dinners I hadn't been invited to, the family trips I'd been excluded from. I had wondered if it was because of me, if somehow I had fallen short. Now I saw it for what it was. She wasn't just shutting me out. She was building another life on the bones of ours. And yet, beneath the pain, there was an odd sense of vindication. I hadn't been paranoid. I hadn't imagined the distance growing or the whispers behind my back. The truth was ugly, but it was real, and it was mine to hold. Tessa's mask began to slip almost immediately. When she realized her access to funds was cut, the syrupy texts turned frantic. First came the excuses, claims of bank errors, miscommunications, technical glitches. When those didn't work, the tone shifted to anger. How dare I meddle? How dare I interfere? But every word she hurled only confirmed what Paula's photos had already shown me. She had underestimated me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even reply. I let her panic grow in the silence, while I carefully tucked Paula's evidence into the same folder with the bank statements. For the first time in years, I felt like the one holding the reins. The hardest part was thinking of Ethan, my son, loyal to a fault, working 12-hour days, believing his wife was at yoga retreats while she was clinking glasses with another man on beaches paid for by his sweat. The thought of telling him made my chest ache. But I also knew that silence could no longer protect him. It would only keep him in the dark while she drained him dry. As I drove home that evening, the envelope on the passenger seat beside me, a sense of resolve took root. Betrayal had knocked me down. But now, armed with proof, I had a chance to protect what mattered most: my son, my grandchildren, and the family name that Tessa thought she could rewrite without consequence. She had built her world on lies and stolen money, but I wasn't going to let her keep it standing. The next step was clear. It was time to prepare for the storm that was coming, And this time, I would not face it silently. When the truth finally reached Ethan, it broke him in ways I had feared, but also expected. I chose my words carefully, sitting by his side at the kitchen table, the evidence folder between us. His hands shook as he turned the pages, each receipt, each photo, each detail hammering at the life he thought he knew. For a moment, he looked at me with such sorrow, I wished I could take it all back, shield him from it the way I had shielded him as a boy. But this wasn't a scraped knee or a broken toy. This was his marriage, his trust, his future. The days that followed were hard. Ethan confronted Tessa, and in typical fashion, she twisted, cried, denied, then raged. But denial doesn't erase evidence, and excuses don't change facts. When Ethan finally told her it was over, she left not with dignity, but with venom, slamming the door behind her and threatening lawyers. But sometimes life has a way of balancing itself. The lawyer Ethan contacted was ready, armed with bank records and the private investigator's report. Tessa's trail of misuse, her trips with Brandon, her withdrawals, even her attempts to cover her tracks, they all told the same story. In the end, she didn't just lose her marriage. She lost her reputation, her financial foothold, and the image she had so carefully curated. Word travels quickly in a small town, and her glamorous facade crumbled faster than she ever imagined. Justice didn't come with fireworks or grand gestures. It came in quiet hearings, in carefully signed papers, in accounts restored and assets protected. It came in Ethan's steady determination to rebuild, not just for himself, but for the children who deserved stability. And it came in small victories for me the day my son thanked me, not just for being his mother, but for being his defender when he couldn't see the truth for himself. As for me, I found peace in unexpected places, in the laughter of my grandchildren when they visited, running through my living room without worry, in evenings spent watching the sun set from my porch, knowing I no longer carried the weight of secrets or silence, and in the quiet pride of realizing that even in my late 60s, I was still capable of standing tall, of protecting my family, of refusing to be erased. If there's one lesson I've taken from all of this, it's that love is not blind, or at least, it shouldn't be. We want to see the best in the people we care about, and sometimes that means we look away from the red flags waving right in front of us. But love without respect, without honesty, isn't love at all. It's manipulation dressed up as devotion. I learned that boundaries don't make you less of a mother or less of a grandmother. They make you stronger, wiser, and more able to protect the people you love. And sometimes, protecting them means speaking the truth, even when it hurts. So, if you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or pushed aside in your own family, I want you to know you're not alone. Your place in this world matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment with your own experiences. Your voice, your truth, it matters more than you know.